I now give the floor to the observer of the Observer State of Palestine to introduce an address by the head of state.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the recorded statement of President Mahmoud Abbas, the President of the State of Palestine, before the 67th session of the General Assembly. I wish you all success in confronting the challenges that we are facing in the world and in the state of Palestine. Thank you. In the name of God, the Merciful, the Compassionate, Your Excellency, Mr. Abdullah Shahid, President of the United Nations General Assembly, Your Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellencies, Heads of Delegations, Members of Delegations, ladies and gentlemen, may the peace, blessings, and mercy of God be upon you. This year marks the 73rd anniversary of the Nakba. More than half of the Palestinian people were uprooted from their land and disposed of their property. Myself, my family, and many others still possess the deeds to our land. These deeds are registered as part of the United Nations records. Here is that deed, and many Palestinians carry theirs as they still hold on to the keys of their houses to this day. Nevertheless, we have not been able to recover our property due to Israeli laws that disregard international law and violate United Nations resolutions, which affirm the right of the Palestinian refugees to return to their homeland and to recover their property and to receive just compensation, most notably as enshrined in Resolution 194. In contrast, Israel, the occupying power, enacts laws and holds court hearings to unlawfully and forcibly displace Palestinians from Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan neighborhoods in Jerusalem, which can only be characterized under international law as ethnic cleansing, which is rejected by our people and the international community as a whole and constitutes a crime under international law. This year also marks 54 years since Israel's military occupation of the rest of the Palestinian territory in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip in 1967. This occupation persists despite having concluded a declaration of principles known as the Oslo Accord to achieve peace and mutual recognition with Israel in 1993, while we remained committed to all of its elements to this day and agreed to every call and initiative to achieve a political solution on the basis of international legitimacy, including the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative and the 2003 Quartet Roadmap, Israel has not honored its obligations under the signed agreements and has evaded participating in peace initiatives and instead pursued its expansionist colonial enterprise, destroying the prospect of a political settlement based on the two-state solution. To those who claim that there is no Palestinian partner for peace, to those claiming that we're missing opportunities just for the sake of it, I challenge them to demonstrate that we have rejected even once a genuine and serious initiative to achieve peace. And I accept the judgment of the world in this regard. Ladies and gentlemen, does the Israeli occupying power believe that it can elude its responsibility for the crime of uprooting more than half of the Palestinian people from their land and for committing numerous massacres, killing and maiming thousands of Palestinians in 1948 in Balad el-Sheikh, Deir Yassin, Abu Shusha, Tantura, Ain Zaytun, Qibya, and other places, Does it believe it would evade responsibility for subsequently destroying over 500 Palestinian towns and villages? Does Israel believe it can simply ignore the legitimate rights, including the political rights of millions of Palestinians within and outside of Palestine, the owners and sons of daughters of this land, with Jerusalem at its heart? Does it believe it can continue its policies to steal their land, suffocate their economy, and prevent them from even breathing the air of freedom? Does Israel believe it can endlessly promote a false narrative that ignores the historical and present rights of the Palestinian people to their homeland? The crimes and aggressive policies of the Israeli occupying power against our people, land, and holy sites will not derail our people's struggle to achieve their freedom and independence on their land. The colonial regime that Israel has established on our land will disappear, regardless of how long it takes. We will not allow them to hijack our lives and kill our people's dreams, hopes, and aspirations to realize freedom and independence. Ladies and gentlemen, it is regrettable that the policies of the international community and the resolutions of the relevant United Nations bodies regarding a solution for the question of Palestine have until now not been upheld and implemented, resulting in a failure to hold Israel accountable and impose sanctions for its violations of international law, allowing Israel, which claims to be a democratic state, to act as a state above the law. Ladies and gentlemen, there are still some countries that refuse to acknowledge the reality that Israel is an occupying power, practicing apartheid and ethnic cleansing. These countries proudly state that they have shared values with Israel. What shared values are they referring to? What shared values are they referring to? This has made Israel arrogant, emboldening it to reject and violate all United Nations resolutions. At the same time, there are those who demand from the Palestinian people and institutions that believe in the culture of peace and the rule of law to provide explanations and justifications to demonstrate that they do not incite hatred or promote violence. For example, we have to explain and justify what appears in our curricula, which reflects our narrative and national identity, while no one is demanding to review the Israeli curricula and media. It is there that the world could see the real incitement by Israeli institutions. We reject these double standards. We reject these double standards. Why should we have to clarify and justify providing assistance to families of prisoners and martyrs who are the victims of the occupation and its oppressive policies? We cannot, ladies and gentlemen, abandon our people. And we will continue our efforts until our prisoners are freed. And I salute here the prisoners' heroic stand. If the occupation ends, there will no longer be a prisoners' issue. I cannot but wonder, and I address all people of conscience around the world, is there anyone on this earth who would punish the dead and prevent their families from burying them, except those who are deprived of morality and humanity? Until when will this historical injustice against our people continue? Do the states that provide financial and military support to Israel, which it then uses to prolong its occupation and kill Palestinians, Do those that remain silent in the face of Israel's aggressive policies, it besieging and suffocating Palestinians, do these states actually believe they're ensuring peace and security for the Israeli people and stability for the region? The answer is no. I say it loud and clear, an emphatic, incontrovertible no. What more do you want from the Palestinian people? We have honored all our obligations under United Nations resolutions. We forced ourselves to endure the suffering imposed upon us, waiting for hope. And what was the result? Historical events over the decades have proven that these international policies towards Israel are misguided. Ladies and gentlemen, as part of unifying our internal front, we reiterate once again that the Palestinian Liberation Organization is the legitimate and sole representative of the Palestinian people. We stress that we are committed to the unity of our people and our land, committed to holding legislative, presidential, and national council elections as soon as holding such elections in Jerusalem is guaranteed as per signed agreements. We call on the international community to help us bring pressure to bear upon the occupying power to ensure these elections are held in Jerusalem, as it is inconceivable that we remain unable to hold elections. And let me state here once again, we did not cancel the elections, but we only postponed them, as we could not hold them in Jerusalem. Until this situation is addressed, we will continue to work on creating the necessary conditions to form a successful national unity government, so that we can assist our people everywhere, so that we can implement reconstruction plans in the Gaza Strip, which requires a complete end to the aggression throughout the territory of the state of Palestine. I'm glad to reaffirm that the coming months will witness the holding of municipal elections in accordance with the law, and elections for all unions and universities are already underway. Ladies and gentlemen, regarding building state institutions, we stress that we have a fully fledged states with institutions that operate in accordance with the rule of law and the principles of accountability, transparency, democracy, pluralism, respect for human rights, and the empowerment of women and youth. We have acceded to more than 115 legal instruments and international organizations committed to upholding our people's rights and strengthening our legislation and regulations, including those pertaining to human rights. We will continue our efforts to accede to what remains of the 500 international organizations acknowledged by the United Nations. We have taken the initiative of working jointly with human rights organizations and civil society organizations in Palestine to preserve these national accomplishments and to improve the work of our institutions on the basis of the rule of law. I have issued instructions to take all necessary measures to correct any wrongdoing and to continue upholding the rule of law, the freedom of expression, and human rights. And this is the path that we are committed to in my country. I reaffirm to the international community our commitment to political engagement and dialogue as the path to achieve peace, the path for peaceful popular resistance, the path to combat terrorism in all its forms and origins in our region and the world. We have more than 83 agreements with other countries around the world to combat global terrorism. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to refer here to the constructive dialogue currently underway with the United States administration to resume Palestinian-US relations and to take steps that would ensure that the occupying power would abide by signed agreements. From our side, we are committed to ensuring the success of this dialogue to create conditions conducive to moving swiftly towards a final political settlement that ends the Israeli occupation of our country and that applies the two-state solution. However, the current and former Israeli governments have persisted in evading the two-state solution based on international law and UN resolutions, and insisted on pursuing occupation and military control over the Palestinian people, while presenting flimsy, insubstantial economic and security plans as an alternative. These unilateral plans will not achieve security and stability for anyone, as they undermine efforts for a genuine peace and prolong occupation and entrench the reality of one apartheid state. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a moment of truth with the occupying power. It seems we are at a crossroads. We have had enough. The situation cannot continue, and our people cannot endure it any longer. I have dedicated my life to achieving peace and chose the path of peaceful, legal, and diplomatic work in international fora. We have extended our hand time and again for peace, and still we cannot find a partner in Israel that believes in and accepts the two-state solution. The leaders of Israel today no longer feel any shame when they arrogantly dismiss this solution that enjoys global consensus. I warn that undermining the two-state solution based on international law and UN resolutions will open the way for other alternatives imposed upon us by the situation on the ground. As a result of the continuation of the Israeli occupation of our state, the absence of a just solution for the plight of 7 million Palestinian refugees uprooted from their land in 1948, the systematic theft of Palestinian land and the ongoing crimes of the occupation and the demolition of homes as a means of collective punishment, the killings and the detentions of thousands, including women, sick people, and children. The imposition of an inhumane blockade, an unjust blockade on the Gaza Strip, and the annexation measures under numerous pretexts and names, including the settlement plan that they now invented in the city of Jerusalem and that we fully reject. All of this coupled with the crime of forcibly displacing Palestinians from their land, as part of a policy of racial discrimination and ethnic cleansing pursued by the occupation in the absence of a deterrent international response. Our people will not surrender to the reality of occupation and its illegal policies and practices. We will pursue our just struggle to fulfill our right to self-determination. And options are available, including returning to a solution based on the partition plan of Resolution 181 of 1947, which gives the State of Palestine 44% of the land, double the territories that we ended up with after 1967. We remind everyone that Israel seized by military force half of the land specified for the State of Palestine in 1948. This solution would be indeed in conformity with international legitimacy. If the Israeli occupation authorities continue to entrench the reality of one apartheid state, as is happening today, Our Palestinian people and the entire world will not tolerate such a situation, and circumstances on the ground will inevitably impose equal and full political rights for all on the land of historical Palestine within one state. In all cases, Israel has to choose. These are the options, and Israel has to choose. Ladies and gentlemen, international law stipulates the right to a free and dignified life and calls on states to take the necessary measures to protect and secure this right, as protection constitutes an indispensable and decisive element for the maintenance of peace, security, stability, and development. In this regard, I call on the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, to work on the basis of relevant United Nations resolutions on protection, including the resolution adopted during the General Assembly Emergency Special Summit held in June 2018, entitled Uniting for Peace. I call upon the Secretary General to take all the necessary steps towards developing an international mechanism for protection as foreseen in his report of August 2018. And I call upon him to activate this mechanism on the borders of the occupied state of Palestine, including East Jerusalem, to avail our people of international protection, the borders of 1967. In parallel and in accordance with the aforementioned resolution, I call upon the Secretary General to convene an international peace conference in line with the internationally recognized terms of reference and UN resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative, and under the sole auspices of the Middle East Quartet. Ladies and gentlemen, to ensure that our initiative is time-bound, we give Israel, the occupying power, 1 year to withdraw from the Palestinian territories it occupied in 1967, including East Jerusalem, and we are ready to work throughout this year on the delineation of borders and solving all final status issues under the auspices of the International Quartet and in accordance with UN resolutions. If this is not achieved, why maintain recognition of Israel based on the 1967 borders? Why maintain this recognition? Moreover, we would go to the International Court of Justice as the highest international judicial body to adjudicate over the legitimacy of the occupation of the land of the Palestinian state and the relevant obligations for the United Nations and states around the world in this regard. All parties will have to abide by the verdict of the court. Colonialism, occupation, and apartheid are prohibited under international law, and they are crimes that must be confronted, a structure that needs to be dismantled. The international community's support for this initiative, consistent with international law and United Nations resolutions, may save the region from a grim, unknown fate. We all have a chance to live in peace and security, to have good neighborly relations, to live each in their own state, and delaying the implementation of these steps will keep the region in a situation of turmoil and instability with dire consequences. Do the leaders of Israel dream of maintaining their occupation forever? Do they want this occupation to last forever? Ladies and gentlemen, why should Palestinians continue living either under Israel's racist occupation or as refugees in neighboring countries? Are there no other alternatives? Freedom, for instance? Palestinians everywhere are creative, innovative, hardworking, dynamic people, and the entire world can testify to that. Palestinians deserve to live free in their homeland. From this podium, I call on the sons and daughters of Palestine everywhere around the world to continue their peaceful and popular struggle that has shown the true image of the valiant Palestinian people striving for freedom and independence by resisting occupation and apartheid. I salute our people everywhere and salute all nations and countries that have stood in solidarity with our people during the Jerusalem uprising and the prisoners' uprising, and against the aggression that claimed the lives of hundreds, that spread destruction and displaced thousands of our people in the West Bank, Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. I also salute all those who took part in demonstrations in the United States and Europe and everywhere across the globe to demand an end to the Israeli occupation, apartheid, and ethnic cleansing, and to call for justice, freedom, and self-determination for our people. This is a burgeoning awakening to get to know the true Palestinian story, and I urge you all to continue defending the true story and defending the Palestinians' rights to freedom, equality, and statehood. Criticizing the aggressive policies and practices of the Israeli occupation and settlers, and of the Zionist narrative in general, is not an act of incitement or anti-Semitism, but rather a duty of every free man and woman in the world. In this connection, I convey to the international community our gratitude and appreciation for their political and material support to our people and for the building of our institutions and national economy. But the time has come to take tangible steps to revive hope and end the Israeli occupation of our land and people, and to consolidate the values of justice and peace in our region. I wonder, what prevents countries that recognize Israel from recognizing the state of Palestine, since they support the two-state solution? And I say to Israel's leaders, do not oppress and corner the Palestinian people. Do not deprive the Palestinian people of dignity, of their right to their land and state, as you will destroy thereby everything. Our patience and the patience of our people is running out. I reiterate yet again that the Palestinian people will defend their existence, their identity, and will not surrender, will not kneel. They will not leave. They will remain on their land, defending it, defending their fate, pursuing the great journey towards ending the occupation. The occupation of the land of the state of Palestine and its capital, East Jerusalem. We say once again, this is our land, our Jerusalem, our Palestinian identity, and we shall defend it until the occupier leaves, as the future belongs to us. And you cannot claim peace and security for yourselves alone. Let us be. Peace be upon you.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the State of Palestine for the statement just made. We shall continue with the general debate.